All right, so you guys are attending the final request for reimbursement, the RFR workbook training. And like I said, my name is Jean Booth. I have with me Adriana Kovacevic, who is one of our newest employees. I have Tracy Gross, who handles your RFRs, and Julie Lynn-Smith, who is our SSPS 3, our supervisor.
Good afternoon.
So we're going to go over a couple of things today. Some of it will be just a review, which will be the request for reimbursement category and backup documentation. And then we're going to go over the end of year RFR submission. And we're going to kind of go through that a little bit slowly because it is a little complicated and confusing. So we want to make sure everybody understands that. So when we get to the end of your RFR submission process, please make sure that you're paying attention and not multitasking, because I know that everyone has a tendency to do that when we do these trainings. I'm guilty of it too. So just make sure that we pay attention to that process so that we can move through this quickly and you guys can understand what we need from you for the end of year. The final thing we're going to do is just kind of review the GERS for the end of year requirements and give you some final notes and important dates. And it would help if I took my notes. We're going to briefly review the RFR categories for just a few minutes. We'll go through this section quickly as it is just a refresher of what we've previously discussed. And as always, if you're unsure of a cost, please contact our office and we'll let you know if it's allowable and what category it should fall under. For backup documentation, you always want to turn in your invoice, pay stub, vendor invoice, cost allocation, and proof of payment. Here's a reminder of the documentation needed for personnel and training. The backup documentation for personnel remains the same regardless of month or risk level. So your backup documentation isn't going to change for any category. Here's some more reminders for travel expenses. I'm going to let you review this on your own time. These are just some examples of operating costs. These costs must be on your budget, in your NOSA, and cost allocated across all victim service funding. Come on. Equipment, this must be pre-approved and on your budget narrative. Equipment includes electronics of all types, including cell phones and computers. Your agency must keep a log of all equipment purchased with grant funds and have equipment available for review during the subrecipient monitoring. Computers should be labeled with property of grant name and number. For detailed information, either reach out to either myself or Julie or review the GERS. And here's a little bit of contract and consultant information. VOCA funds generally should not be used to support contract services, and contracts, applicable license, and confidentiality documentation must be submitted to us within 30 days of the contract start date. Here's some allowables under the other category. I'll give you a second to kind of review those.
While people are reviewing, can you please check that you're on mute? We are picking up some background sounds. Thank you.
All right, then we have indirect costs. This is good information to kind of review for your indirect cost information. Okay. And then match is a requirement for VOCA, FIPSA, and VOCA supplemental awards, unless your agency has already received an approved match waiver. Match can be volunteers, in-kind support, or any services not paid for by federal funding. Match must be completed by the end of the fiscal year. We're going to take a second and test your knowledge. So please utilize the chat feature with this. We're going to do just a real quick little quiz. I will go ahead and read off the expense, and you tell me what category you think it should go in. The expense is time paid for administrative staff. Where do you think that should go? Awesome, Annie. Awesome, Jed. Very good. Admin staff should go to indirect. All right. We're going to do staff mileage. Where should that go? Awesome, Annie. Awesome, Aaron. Ooh, got quick ones on that. The staff mileage goes to travel. And then rent. Where would rent go? Awesome, Kim. Awesome. You guys are like on it today. I like it. Time paid for direct service staff. Perfect, Kathleen. Yeah, awesome, guys. And then audit costs. Where would we put our audit costs? Awesome. We have quite a few different answers for this one. I like it. So audit costs are actually going to go in our operating category. Typically, we've had them throughout the years in our other category, and then some people do use that in their indirect. But you can actually put all audit costs in your operating category as long as they're cost allocated amongst funding. And then purchase of cell phones, I clicked that a little too fast. But where would your cell phones go to? Awesome, you guys. Great. Janitorial supplies, I got a quick clicking before I asked the question. Where would we put the janitorial supplies? Awesome, Jen. Okay, great. And then if we're going to do food gift cards for our clients, where are we going to send those out of? That is correct. We're all doing that under other. And then payment for contracted services. This is kind of an easy one. Perfect. Awesome, you guys. You're doing great. I really appreciate it. This was a fun little quiz. I hope you enjoyed it. So we're now going to move into our end of year process. This is going to affect both the end and the beginning of year RFR reports. These usually occur in June and July and September and October. We're going to talk about the special guidelines for the end of year or beginning of grant year RFR submissions. These pertain to grants that either end or begin in June or July or in September, October. I'm mostly going to talk about the June, July end dates, but please be aware that if your grant ends in September, these instructions we're talking about are eligible for when your grant cycle ends or begins. For this discussion, the grant year ends June 30th, 2021, and expenses cannot be incurred once the funding year has ended. It's your award year, regardless if you have a new award or not. Grants ending June 30th must have RFR submissions by July 9th, 2021. All services and payroll time must be allocated for June, even if payment does not occur until July. All June costs must be on the June RFR, regardless if payment costs were made in July. The end of grant and beginning of grant RFRs are the only 2 months that do not strictly adhere to our reimbursement policies. What does this mean for you? If your pay period is from June 27th to July 10th, you will have to allocate the 4 days, June 27th to June 30th, onto your June RFR, and the remaining 10 days, July 1st to July 10th, to your July RFR, even though payroll will not incur until later in July. If you receive invoices the last week of June for June expenses, for example, utilities, but do not write a check for them until July, they still need to be on the June RFR as they are June expenses. If you receive invoices the last week of June for July expenses, for example, rent, those expenses need to be on the July RFR as they are for July. If you receive invoices that include both June and July, you must allocate appropriately. June charges cannot be on the July RFR and will not be reimbursed if they are included. It's up to you to cost allocate your services very carefully for these 2 months. We're going to go over what that looks like for everybody. The grant year ends June.
We have a question.
Yes. Sure.
In this scenario, how does one allocate the fringe benefit cost between months? And I know you're going to get to that, so I didn't know if you wanted to address it or talk about it now.
So Elizabeth, we're going to get to that in just a few minutes. I don't want to confuse everybody just yet. I know this is going to be a lot of information. If I don't answer that question when we get there, ask me for a clarifying and we can try to go into it in a little bit more detail. But give me just a few minutes to get to that though. The grant year ends June 30th, 2021, and expenses cannot be incurred once the funding year has ended, regardless if you have a new award or not. If you need to make changes to your workbook, these need to be made prior to submitting your final RFR. This includes personnel changes or any additional lines that need to be added to any category of the workbook. You can send this request to either myself or Julie, and we'd be happy to make those changes real quick and send your workbooks back to you.
This is
Okay,
Julie.
so we're good.
I just wanted to emphasize that because of the proration, a lot of agencies will need either a third pay period line in either June or July. So that's something to look at ahead of time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we're going to practice what we're talking about. In front of us, we have an example of an agency payroll. At the top, you'll see payroll dates. You'll notice that these dates have both June and July hours. You'll then see that the total hours worked and gross pay. Okay. Now that we've looked at the payroll information, let's take a quick look at the activity-based time card. For this training, we're going to focus on employee one's information. You'll see how the pay period matches the payroll information. Next, we'll look at the time worked. We already know that the first week will have 40 hours total and can see the allocation for each grant. For our example, we're looking at the 16 VOCA hours. The only week we really need to focus on is the second week, as there are hours in both June and July. From here, we can see that 7 hours are allocated for June and 6 hours are allocated to July. In the next slide, we'll go over how this allocation is done, and then we'll discuss how to enter this information in your workbook for proper RFR submission. Do we have any questions so far over what we're talking about?
I haven't seen any come through yet, Jean, but please go ahead and type them if you guys have them.
Okay, awesome. Okay. This personnel allocation table has both weeks combined. As we stated earlier, we already know the first week allocation is based off the activity-based time card. The second week not only has the fiscal year split, but also has vacation time. The easiest way to figure out this allocation is to utilize the personnel time off allocation. To do this, you would enter the total hours worked and then the total time off. This can be vacation, sick, or holiday time off. Finally, you would enter the total grant hours worked. The easiest way to do this is how you see it on this slide. Separate them by funding sources so you can easily see the allocations across funding streams. The final step you would do is to subtract the June grant hours from the total grant hours to get the total July hours with the holiday allocation.
Jane, may I say something? This is Tracy.
Yes, please.
Just to let everyone know, this personnel allocation just needs to be used if you have time off within that monthly split. If it's just a straight hours, it's just a really easy take the hours worked in June, take the hours worked in July, and do your allocation that way. This slide is specifically if you're dealing with vacation or sick time within that June-July split.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, it's now time to enter the information into your June workbook. Continuing with employee one, you will enter the total hours worked and the total grant hours as allocated from the time card. In this example, these are made up hours as the time card example we have only has one period. For the second pay period, you're going to enter the total hours worked and the prorated June allocation based off the personnel time off allocation for June that we just went over. Please notice that none of the other numbers were prorated. You'll enter the full amount for total hours worked, gross wages, and any employer paid fringe. These will calculate correctly and you'll get the balance on your July submission when you do the hours for the pay period that were worked in July. So Elizabeth, this is where we answer your question. You're going to allocate the fringe benefit costs using this allocation. So whatever the hours worked in June, you're going to put those total grant hours there, and then everything else is the same as it would normally be on your workbook, and it will allocate correctly once you finish June and July. Okay. When it's time to enter your information into your July workbook, you're going to enter the total hours worked and the prorated July allocation based off of the personnel time off allocation for July that we just went over. For the second pay period, you're going to enter the total hours worked and the total grant hours as allocated from the time card. For ease of this example, employee 1 worked the full 80 hours toward this award on the second week. These are made up hours, and as a time card example we have only has one pay period. Please also notice that none of the other numbers were prorated. You're going to enter the full amount for total hours worked, gross wages, and employer paid fringe. These will calculate correctly, and you'll match the balance that's from the June submission. Do you have any questions so far?
Haven't seen any come through yet, Jean.
Okay. We're going to talk about services. To prorate for services, we're going to look at this Nevada energy bill. You'll see how the service period is from June 23rd to July 23rd. This means that 8 days are allocated to June and 22 days are allocated to July. And here's, you're going to see the total of the bill. Okay. The first thing you want to do is figure out how much your bill is per day. You do this by dividing the total bill by the total days billed. In this example, we're looking at $7.13 charged per day. So your total bill was $213.90. It was for 30 days, which equals out to about $7.13 per day. Your June allocation is going to be 8 days at the $7.13, which will equal out to $57.04. Your July allocation is 22 days at the $7.13, which equals $156.86. If you add those two numbers up, you're going to get the $213.90. So you can see how that will equal out once you finish billing for both June and July. For the workbook example, we're assuming that there is a Nevada energy bill paid in June and the one we received in July that we are prorating because it has both June and July services on it. So on the top of our workbook example, you can see the first fictitious Nevada energy bill, the utility total cost of $240, and Boca's paying 50% of that. And the second line, you can see it's utility Nevada energy. The total cost is $57.04. So that would be your prorated service cost for June based off of our allocation. Since our example bill was paid in July for June and July services, we're only going to have one bill on our July workbook. This would be prorated costs we have already figured out when we did the June RFR. So it's going to be the $213.90 times 30 days, or divided by 30 days times 22 days. I'm sorry, there's a typo. And it would equal the $156. So you can see on our utilities that we have that $156.86.
So Jean, we have a question.
Yes.
What if a bill
Excellent.
comes in July that has some June dates on it, but it comes after the June RFR has already been submitted, since that is a deadline of July 9th?
So you're going to want to do an amended or a revised RFR for that June RFR, which would be fine. We just have to have all of the June RFRs in by July 9th because it's the end of our fiscal year. So in order to avoid being on, all I can think of is cost allocation. Julie, what am I
Okay, so to avoid having to do stale claims,
Thank you.
we have to get all of the RFRs for the fiscal year for the state that ends June 30th to fiscal by a certain date in July, and that's actually, I think, July 20th or 21st. Tracy can correct me, she knows the deadline, but so we have to process a ton of RFRs. That's why we're asking that they get submitted July 9th, so that we can avoid stale claims, as it takes several months sometimes to get stale claims processed because they have to go through an additional process. We understand that you guys may have some bills that come after that July 9th deadline, and you'll do the revised or amended RFR for June, and that might have to go through the stale claims process, but that means you won't be waiting for the bulk of your reimbursement. You'll get most of it, and then you'll just be waiting for those things that came in later. So we hope that that will reduce your financial burden of late payments. Hopefully that answered the question. If you guys have more questions on that, just feel free to type them in the chat. And then we have another question. If we receive an extension to the end of September, we would do this for September, October, correct? And our June
Yes.
RFR submission would be completed as usual.
Yes, that is correct. So we want to make sure that the cost allocation method happens at the beginning and end of your award. So if you have an extension through the end of September, then you are going to do this process in September. The biggest difference between September and June submissions is September is still due on the 15th because it isn't affected by our fiscal year ending. So we're trying to go over this so that you guys can have a pretty decent understanding of the June RFR submission for July, simply because our fiscal end year has such a strict turnaround time.
And I want to highlight that even if you have an extension through the end of September, we will still need your June RFR by July 9th. It just, you won't have to do the prorating. You'll continue to just put what you paid for in June on your June RFR.
That is correct. Okay.
That's all the
Are we
questions.
doing okay? Awesome. Do we have any other questions, guys? I know this is a lot of information, so please ask questions. Don't feel uncomfortable with it.
Hey, Miss Jean, this is Icy.
Hi, Miss Icy.
Hey, just to clarify, so for all of our contractors, I probably won't get the invoices from them until July 9th, so I'll have to do an amendment for all of those?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Jean.
it's just the one. Yeah, it's just the 1 month, and unfortunately, this is the only month that we have that real strict early deadline, and it just has to do with our fiscal year, because in order to get you guys paid in a timely manner, we have to have all of our RFRs reviewed and submitted to fiscal by July 20th. So we need at least a few days to process them. Okay.
And this is Julie. You don't need to submit a revise for each thing that comes in. You can wait till you have all your June items that came in after the 9th and just submit one revised June RFR.
All right. Does that answer your question, Icy?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, good. So it looks like we had a question come in. We will not have the second pay period in June reflected in our accounting system by July 9th. We will submit our claim for the first pay period and then submit a revised RFR later in the month. Yes, that would be fine. Yeah, if you have bills or invoices or things that come in after the July 9th deadline, you are allowed to do a revised RFR. We will encourage it. We will still continue to pay it. It just, like we said, the revision may end up on a stale claim process. We are trying our very best to avoid having everybody go through the stale claim process. which is why we are requesting the RFRs due by July 9th. I know this is a really fast turnaround for the June RFRs, but we do really want to get you guys paid in a timely manner because we understand the hardship that it places on you. Okay. So for your reference, we've gone ahead and included the GERS that talks about the end of year grant instructions. This was sent to you at the beginning of the fiscal year. We also included it in here. The final request you'll see on number 3 must be submitted to the GMU by 10 days after the end of the state fiscal year, which is by July 10th. Because July 10th is a Saturday, we're requesting all the RFRs be submitted by July 9th. Okay. Final notes. June RFRs are due no later than Friday, July 9th, 2021, even if you have an extension. The last date to submit a revised RFR for state fiscal year SFY21 is September 30th, 2021, and then for awards ending in June 30th, and then it's December 31st for awards ending in September. All documentation must be maintained by your agency for all RFR requests. If an employee or item is not on the workbook or the budget narrative, it will not be reimbursed. Any request for workbook changes must be emailed with the workbook to the GPA, either myself or Julie, and if approved, the workbook will be updated and returned to your agency prior to monthly submission. If your RFR is not submitted on or before Friday, July 9th, you do run the risk of it becoming a stale claim, which can add additional time, typically a couple months, on your reimbursement. So we do want to encourage all of you to turn in your June RFRs no later than Friday, July 9th.
And about the workbook request, sorry, this is Julie. We're asking that you think about whether or not you're going to need a third pay period because July 9th is going to be a crazy busy day for us. And if we're getting a bunch of requests on July 9th to add a third line to the workbook for you, it may be delayed if we're getting requests from 50 different agencies to do that on that day. So the more advance notice you can give us that you need a third line on your June RFR workbook would be greatly appreciated.
Yes. Okay, and then this is just a slide of our contact information. As a reminder, all RFR submissions are to be sent to the funds request email with your workbook and the required backup based off of your risk assessment. For a greater chance of receiving answers to questions, email requests should be made to the GPA either, Okay. Your email request should be made to either myself, Julie, or Adriana. I would encourage at this time myself and Julie, because Adriana is still in training, and the DCFS grants email. That way, if someone's out sick or on vacation, we all have access to your email. And I want to thank you guys for your time. At this time, if you have any questions, please use them in the chat box, and we will answer any questions that come in.
Jean, this is Tracy. May I say something?
Yeah.
Yes, Tracy.
Just a reminder, if you're a low or moderate risk and you are submitting your documentation on a general ledger as opposed to submitting invoices, can you please show the proration formula in the workbook so we can tell immediately that the proration was done? Otherwise, I will need to request full backup.
Yes, thank you for that reminder, Tracy.
And then we got a question, but before I do that, if you haven't already signed in with your name and agency to get credit, please do so now before the training ends so you get credit. But we have a question. There's an agency that was requested an extension but has not heard if they were granted it yet. Will this hold up the June/July RFR?
No, most everybody should have received their extension information. If you haven't received it yet, go ahead and email me, and I'll see what happened to that or where it is in the process. But it should not hold up your June or July RFR. Thank you. I'm glad you found this helpful. Do we have any other questions?
I'm not seeing any yet.
Okay. Well, if you guys don't have any questions, know that you can always email us, and we are happy to help you walk through any of this. And then we'll just give you the rest of your day back. Thank you guys so much for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.